Welcome to another episode of the Empower Hour, brought to you by the ladies of the Empower Plant in Fasig Brooks. And so excited to have one of my good friends from law school on, Alessandra Serano. But before we get to Ali, I want to introduce everybody else on the panel. Rose Caswick, my partner. Kimmy Hogan, are you here? I don't see her.
Hey.
Oh, okay, there's Kimmy, my other partner, and Betsy, who's our newest attorney in the office, and Kia Thomas, who's our PR marketing extraordinaire. So welcome, everybody. Who is that? Whose picture is that just popped up?
I'm saying the same thing.
That is somebody with my organization. I sent out the Zoom link mistakenly and then resent out the fact that it was Facebook Live. So Matt and Adele are with my organization. That's my fault. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm sorry. I googled.
Do I need to jump off? I wanted to hear Allie. She's so knowledgeable. But I'll jump off if I need to.
No, you can stay on and welcome. Just stay here. It's fine with us. Welcome. So before we get going with Allie, though, what we do traditionally is, well, I'll let Rose explain. Rose has a drink of the week. So Rose, explain what it is and why we do this drink of the week.
Yeah, so we do a drink every week to honor a empowered woman. This week, it's a chamomile tea, bourbon, and honey situation in honor of Toni Morrison. I just recently read Beloved for the first time. And there's like a poem or a song in there about chamomile as like a herbal remedy. This drink is terrible though, so I'm sorry.
I don't think it's bad. I think it's pretty good.
I thought
It's actually good.
I do love chamomile tea though.
Okay.
Pretty tasty. So I think you did a good job, Rose.
All right, I'll take it.
Hey, tell Allie the name of the book that we kind of follow-ish.
Yeah, a lot of the recipes come from Free the Tipple.
No.
A recipe book, cocktail book about empowered women.
Well, thank you. I think it's good. And so what we're doing here today is we're talking about human trafficking, and I could think of no better expert than Alessandra Serano, and she's a major kick-ass lawyer and just a kick-ass human being and an empowered woman, one of the strongest women that I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. So Allie, I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome. And why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself so I don't read your CV out for you.
Sure. Thanks, Carrie. So Carrie and I went to law school, graduated University of Miami School of Law in 1999. That was last century, Carrie. Unbelievable.
Gen X is where it's at, baby. Gen X.
That's right, Gen X. I'm currently employed as the Chief Legal Officer for Operation Underground Railroad, which is an organization, a nonprofit organization that works to help rescue and recover sexually exploited children and people from around the world. So we provide resources, training, you name it, guidance on how foreign governments can help their trafficking problem, because one of the misnomers is that, most people think, well, trafficking doesn't happen here. It happens everywhere. So we work across, I think it's something like 30 something countries worldwide, where we have resources and training and people to help law enforcement recover children and vulnerable victims from trafficking. Prior to that, I just joined them in December. Prior to that, I spent 18 and a half years as an assistant U.S. attorney with the U.S. Department of Justice, where I primarily focused on child exploitation and human trafficking. For the last 4 years with the Department of Justice, I was on special assignment for 2 years in Washington, D.C. as senior policy counsel for the administration on human trafficking, and then 2 years in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I was the criminal chief and first assistant. And then I spent 4 years before that in private practice, paying off my student loans. Before I joined law school, I was in law enforcement for a few years. Born and raised in New Jersey. So sometimes the attitude and the language comes out. Apologies in advance for live audience. But now I work and live in San Diego, California.
It's all good. It's all good. We're very easygoing, so no worries. But I got to tell you, you make me feel like a huge slacker, because I've just been in private practice my whole career, and I feel like I haven't done enough to help people and help humanity get better. So I listen to you and I look at you, I see you all the time on Facebook and I see what you're doing, and you earned your pilot's license for God's sakes when you were working down in the Virgin Islands. But like, you do so much to help people, and I feel like I need to do more. So I'm so impressed by you, and I'm so mad at you because I feel like I'm such a slacker. So thanks for that. Cheers
You're
to
not a
that.
slacker.
Hey, why did you leave DOJ? Because you had a pretty illustrious career there, and what made you choose where you are now?
So I loved being with DOJ. I loved being a prosecutor, loved helping give justice to vulnerable victims. Operation Underground Railroad is an organization I've followed for many years. It was the founder is a former Homeland Security agent of mine that I worked with. He brought me my first exploitation case in 2004. And he decided to leave government in 2011 to start this organization because he wanted to provide a service or a resource that government can't. And that is that the US government can't. He wanted to do a lot of training and operations and recoveries of children overseas. And the US government just can't do that unless there's some US nexus. So he started this organization back in 2013. I followed him. I had his organization come and speak to a bunch of US attorneys when I was in Washington. And then coincidence or happenstance or divine intervention, or I don't know what it was, last April, his name is Tim Ballard, Tim and his folks happened to be in St. Thomas, and they called me out of the blue and said, hey, we're in St. Thomas, we're on a layover, come meet us. And I met with him and with Tim and the CEO and a couple of other folks and just started talking about what I did. And from there, they reached out to me and said, have you ever thought about leaving DOJ? And my first response was, no, I'm a lifer, I'm going to do this. But then in hearing what they do and hearing what I could help provide and help move the mission along and help other vulnerable victims and children from around the world, I thought this might be a good opportunity. I mean, I could always go back if I didn't like it. I didn't think I wasn't not going to like it. That makes sense. I knew I was going to like it. I knew Tim, I knew this organization. And so I jumped ship and haven't looked back.
That's awesome. Okay, so I have a stupid question before I throw it to the panel, but I really want you to explain what is human trafficking, because I think there's a misconception out there that it doesn't happen in our backyard, that it's a bunch of Russians trafficking, young girls to really rich billionaires for, prostitution. Mm-hmm. And I just want you to explain that human trafficking is in our backyards and what it really means.
Sure. So the first part of the question is, what is human trafficking? And human trafficking is a label that can describe a bunch of different types of criminal activity. It's most related to sex trafficking, right? People selling their bodies for something of value. It also could be labor trafficking. It could be organ harvesting. It could be child soldiers. It could be child sacrifice. It could be begging, forced begging. It is an umbrella term that covers a wide different number of activities. And so does this happen here in the United States? Absolutely. I can think of an example. I did a training up in the Catskills up in New York. I was visiting a friend and she's like, hey, can you go to my local church, my community center, and do a talk on human trafficking? Sure, no problem. And a couple of people are like, well, this is the Catskills. It doesn't happen here. So I literally pulled up my computer, went on the internet, pulled up a couple of websites where there was escorts available in the Catskills.
Wow.
So it happens everywhere. And
a lot of that is forced, right? A lot of the escorts and a lot of the prostitution is actually forced. It's not women voluntarily doing it.
Well, when you say forced, I mean, it's not necessarily, somebody being dragged against their will or at gunpoint. Most of it is through coercion and manipulation and out of necessity. When I give talks, I talk to parents and said, how many of you parents out there were, teenagers? Of course, everybody raises their hand. How many of you woke up one day and said, you know what, I want to grow up and be a prostitute? Nobody does that. They do it out of survival, or they do it out of manipulation, or they do it out of some kind of need, whether it's an emotional need, a physical need. Traffickers are using drugs and alcohol and other types of things to make people dependent. It's promises of a better future for the labor trafficking. So it's not necessarily force, which you think like brute force. It can be other types of manipulation.
Well, thank you for that explanation. Rose, let's start with you. What questions do you have?
Well, I just wanted to say, I think, one of the things that we talk about on this show across the board when we talk to people is about non-traditional legal careers. I think it's really cool what you've been doing and all the different things that you've done. Is there something that we can look for, or certain things, signs that we can look for to tell if someone around us is being trafficked?
The answer to that is yes. And I could probably go on for an hour, but I won't do that here. So everybody knows in their town of the place where typically women are working in prostitution, right? There's some house, there's some part of town, there's some bar that everybody's aware of it. I mean, that's one way that you can detect that it's trafficking. With regard to children, a lot of people think, well, not my kid, or I live in a very affluent neighborhood or in a nice town. It can happen in any schools. I've prosecuted cases where the kids were being recruited out of middle school, out of high school, and it's done by other kids because they are being told by the trafficker, I'll let you go to school today, but you better bring 2 potential people home with you. Or in foster care, we see a lot of this in foster care, or other type of dependency type of situation. So as a parent, if you're looking for whether your kid is being trafficked or not, a couple of things. One, if they're coming home, for example, with things that they shouldn't have. I mean, if you didn't buy your kid an iPhone and the kid's got an iPhone, how did they get that? I mean, very simple things like that. Regard to online exploitation and trafficking, if your kid has a computer in his or her room and you are not actively monitoring what that your child is looking at, you don't know who's contacting your kid. The example I give is I grew up in the 80s, okay? And my mom used to tell me, you can only play in the front yard, you can only play on your street, because she wanted to have eyes on us. Well, parents today think if your kid is in your room, they're safe. Well, if they have a computer that has access to the internet, the whole world is coming into their room. So the other types of exploitation and trafficking that we see are people contacting primarily children to take sexually explicit photos of them, which can turn into sextortion, and other types of things, because the internet is forever. So you as a parent, or we as parents, need to be aware of what our kids are doing. So those are the 2 main things to be aware of, is just on items that kids have, or behaviors, change in behavior, as well as monitoring what's going on their computers or phones.
Awesome.
So Betsy, what are you thinking? What are your thoughts? You've got little kids. I know this is kind of scaring the bejesus out of me, but luckily my boys are like 6'3", and I don't think anybody wants to mess with them since they're so freaking tall. They can't even fit in a regular car. So, but Betsy and Kimmy both have young kids. So I know that it's very scary. And I know we've done a lot to make sure that we're monitoring everything on their phones, everything on their computers. My kids don't have social media. So we've taken a lot of steps to try to really limit their exposure to the internet and what they can see and what people can see from them. But how are you feeling, Betsy?
Pretty scary. It's alarming. Every time I learn about human trafficking, I get scared again. So, but I do have some questions to kind of build off what you just said. So if I have a 12-year-old daughter, I look for on that laptop, because it's not going to be like a sex trafficking or human trafficking app or anything like that. It's going to be a lot more sneaky than that. And it might even be, like to your point before, another child that they're talking to that's kind of grooming them or bringing them in. So, if I do, and I will look through her devices, what am I looking for?
So it's any platform that the child can communicate on. And that can be, I don't think most kids nowadays use Facebook. I think that's like an old person's thing now, right?
Yeah, it is.
It's Snapchat, it's Signal, I mean, there's so many apps out there and they come up every day. I think number one is just being aware of the type of platforms that your child uses, and monitoring those. But I guess the bigger problem as parents is there are going to be apps that we don't know about. And then you want your child to feel comfortable to be able to talk to you about that. So they may be hiding an app, or they may have a phone, or maybe they're using a friend's phone that has an account. So I think it's one of those things that not only do you have to monitor the devices that you're aware of, but at least talk to your child about what, we have the talk about good touch and bad touch, but it's like, good talk and bad talk, and like who your friends are, or, why are you, talking to this person? This month, OUR, Operation Underground Railroad, is doing a campaign on what love isn't, or what is not love, because of Valentine's Day. And this is one of the things that, every kid wants to be a part of something, a part of a group, or if you're, a child, maybe they want a boyfriend or they want a girlfriend. And so it's talking to them about what's a good relationship and what's a bad relationship. A bad relationship is someone saying, I want to be with you, but I want you to have sex with these 5 people and collect $100 and give me the money. That's not love.
No.
So we're doing a campaign this month that I encourage your viewers to take a look at on our website to learn more about that.
What's your website?
OurRescueorg. OurRescuE.org.
Allie, is that something that, for example, my 12-year-old daughter should see, or just me as her parent?
There are age appropriate videos that your daughter can watch, and perhaps watch them together. I have a 14-year-old niece that since she's been 6 or 7 years old, I've been sitting and talking with her, and now my 12-year-old nephew, talking to them about, like, tell me about your friends, tell me about this, what's going on here. And so they may not be going through certain issues, but like, for example, my niece had a friend who's going through some issues where she was abusing over-the-counter drugs. I mean, she's 14 years old. This has happened in her Girl Scout troop. So it's just talking to your children about, other issues that are going on perhaps with their friends, because kids talk, they're social.
Yeah. Carrie, do you have a particular app that we can use to monitor it? I mean, I do have a monitoring app on my kids' devices, but I'm wondering what your thoughts on whether those are reliable, or, I mean, obviously we shouldn't rely totally on them, but are they helpful?
They're certainly helpful, but it's like any other type of monitoring system. If you don't know what you're looking for, it's not going to be helpful, and you can only monitor what you know about.
Yeah, and let me just get it to you straight, Betsy. and Allie, I don't know if you experienced this with your niece, but I know your sister's a Marine, right? So she's like,
she's a retired lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. Not much gets past her. Right.
So I don't know if you've experienced this, but my kids almost are like little prisoners. They find any way they can to get around the rules. We shut off the internet, so they don't have internet connection on their phones. Well, they can go into an email and there might be a link, and they click on the link and that gets them into the internet. So whatever restriction you put up, Betsy, Kimmy, Kia, just be ready, because they will try to find, it's almost like a game. They try to ferret their way around it and find a way to get where they're not supposed to go. And that's what scares me, is because people are waiting for them there. And especially like with girls, girls want to put up pretty pictures on social media. Boys don't care. They don't give a crap about how they look, and they don't want any pictures up. But I think girls you have to treat them differently. And is that a sexist thing to say? I don't know. I think it's kind of reality.
The large number of sex trafficking victims are predominantly girls, and a lot of it has to do with self-esteem. Again, how many of us were young girls? When I was 12 years old, I thought I was, too fat, my hair was too curly, my nose was too big, whatever it is, self-esteem issues. So if someone takes a liking to you and likes you for who you are, then you're gonna, trust them. And so we just need to be aware of who they are communicating with. So a lot of it is, and you're absolutely right, kids push boundaries. I mean, that's what kids do. But as a parent and as a community, it's not just parents. I mean, I'm an aunt to a niece and a nephew. I don't have children of my own. It takes a village, right? So we all need to be cognizant of what kids are doing and being aware, so we can, keep eyes on them. One of my favorite sayings is trust but verify, right? We need to trust them, but we also need to verify that what they're saying is true and that they're going to come forward to us if there's a problem, and not berate them or be angry with them if they're coming forward if they did something they weren't supposed to do.
That's good advice. Yep. Kimmy, what are your thoughts?
I have a lot. Allie, it's nice to meet you. I'm Kimmy.
Nice to meet you.
One question I have, I'd love you to talk a little bit about how do law enforcement, how do they catch the bad guys? How do y'all find the kids overseas that are being trafficked? Like, what do those efforts look like?
I'm going to give you a lawyer answer. It depends. But so, for example, one of the things that OUR does is overseas is that we train foreign law enforcement on how to do undercover stings. So everyone's seen the TV show To Catch a Predator, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's
that's a good one.
Working with the organization, they're pretending to be a 12-year-old boy or 13-year-old girl, and the folks show up, and they always show up with the same thing: condoms and wine coolers, always.
Just to have a chat. I just wanted to help her out. She just needed to talk, and she needed a hug.
Right. And that's why I have these wine coolers and condoms with me when I showed up at the door. Right. Yes, of course. And I have a bridge in Brooklyn that's for sale too. So one of the things that we do is we train foreign law enforcement to go online, to go on places where children may be, or go in chat rooms or other types of locations on the internet where predators may be, and try to lure those folks out. So one aspect is the undercover or the lure, where we're trying to identify where these pedophiles are and get them to communicate, get them to do something where we can get recoverable evidence to help local law enforcement prosecute their case. That's one way. Another way is just victims coming forward. I've had cases as a prosecutor. I mean, I had a girl, one victim comes to mind, where she was at juvenile hall. And she called the police and said, I've been trafficked. I've had parents say, my kid's been he or she misses, Mondays and Fridays of school. I don't know where they go. What's going on? Or what's really sad is many times you have kids that are online that they'll take pictures of themselves, naked pictures of themselves, which is considered child sexual abuse material, or child pornography is another term for it. And they're being extorted, either for sex, money, or something else. And so they come forward and say, hey, this has happened to me. So there's a whole myriad of ways that these cases come forward.
Do you find that it's mostly individual bad actors, or are there big groups where it's a child sex trafficking ring and you're trying to take down like an organized group of folks?
It's both. It's both, and I'll tell you why. Recent statistics say that human trafficking, or sex trafficking in particular, is either the second or third most illicit criminal industry in the world. That's behind narcotics and firearms trafficking. It is a $1 billion industry. And what organization, criminal organization, what cartel, what gang, what crew, what group is not going to want to be part of that money?
Yeah.
Right? So you have the organized side of it, and OUR does a really good job of getting out in these foreign governments to identify who those groups are. But then we also help with the one-offs, the pedophile, the person sitting in their parents' basement, and forgive the comment, always seemed like the pedophiles were always living in their mom's basement. They didn't have a job. That was like probable cause right there. It was a bad joke, I guess.
I was trying not to.
I'm sorry.
Somebody else is laughing, so let me know.
One of the disclaimers I have is that sometimes I crack a couple of jokes about this. This is not a funny topic. I'm not trying to make light of it, but sometimes it's so serious that you have to use humor to be able to like go the distance.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't mean to offend anybody or anything like that. So yes, so it comes in all sorts of forms. You have, it's the same thing as drugs. You have big drug cartel networks, and then you have the street dealer, you know, selling dime bags.
Mm-hmm.
Depends.
You guys are like superheroes. Sorry, Kimmy, go ahead.
Yeah, no. I had you earlier mentioned different types of trafficking, and you said child sacrifice. Can you talk about that a little more? What does that mean exactly?
Exactly how it sounds. Unfortunately, it happens a lot in, we're seeing it a lot in Africa and Central Africa, where a lot of the tribes or the other religious groups think that sacrificing a child or cutting off certain body parts will somehow raise the level of, or the health or whatever of a particular person. And that is something that OUR does. We provide resources and services for, if there are survivors of the child sacrifice, we help them get the necessary surgery or the counseling or repatriation to their home country. We can do that. So, I mean, I don't want to get too graphic, but I mean, you're talking about cutting off kids' body parts.
Yeah, that's what Coney was doing, right? Isn't that what Coney was doing? Where Coney had like his army of children, and he would cut off arms or legs of the children of the rival tribe or whatever.
Yes, and that also leads into the whole, but that, I think that was more for defensive mechanism because it was a rival tribe. I mean, with that, you have a lot of child soldiers, and that's another form of trafficking. But the child sacrifice is typically a religious or tribal act. So yeah, and it happens predominantly in Africa, Central Africa. Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah,
it's awful.
Cool. So Kia, what you got going on?
I kind of want to segue. You were talking about children sacrificing. Kimmy has some great questions. But to kind of segue into the organ trafficking, in regards to, I know it's been highlighted, especially in the Black community, in regards to how some people have been disappearing because of actual underground organ trafficking of those particular organs. I know that illicitly kidneys are probably the highest, that's at least given by the World Health Organization. But I wanted you to kind of go into some details in regards to that, because I don't think everybody knows that this actually happens. And then that's one of the things kind of like missing while Black, where a lot of those kidneys are going, not kidneys, or organs are going missing, and these people are going missing because of this situation.
So it's a problem from around the world, but what we're seeing a lot of is in lower socioeconomic communities or countries. Again, this is happening a lot in South America, Central America, Africa, where people are either agreeing or they think they're agreeing that they're going to give like one of their kidneys in exchange for money, and it turns out they're not. Or, I mean, we've all seen, or maybe you haven't seen, I just finished binge watching Squid Game, which there's a whole aspect of that in that docuseries, and you can get thousands of dollars for a particular organ. And if you are in a country where they don't keep, good records, census records, or, I mean, you were talking about, people going missing, the homeless population here in the US is especially vulnerable to that. So it just takes somebody with minimal medical skills to be able to, cut out a kidney or worse. So, and it happens, and what we're seeing is that a lot of these organs are being shipped to places like the Middle East, or it's happening here in the US. I mean, it's no different. It's the haves and the have-nots, right? So
What's the reason for that? Like, what's the reason for the organs? What's going on?
Well, you can't buy organs, at least in the US under federal law. You cannot buy an organ. You can pay for the surgery, but you can't buy an organ. So it's a supply and demand.
Gotcha.
I mean, as people want to live longer or healthier, they need organs. And so there's just a shortage of that. So why not take it from this person who's nobody's going to care if that person's missing, or this child, you know? So, I mean, that's the saddest thing. You have, parents who maybe are seeing or saying, hey, I want something better for my kid. They give their kid to, somebody in town, that person in town is going to say, I'm going to take your kid. I'm going to get this person educated. And then you never see them again. I mean, we're seeing a lot of that.
Is it legal to sell your organs?
It is illegal under federal law to sell your organs. You can donate them,
Right.
but you cannot sell body parts legally. But unfortunately, it happens all the time.
What are you guys doing with respect to forced labor? And, like I grew up in South Florida where there's a big migrant farm worker population. And, we spent a lot of time doing community service, trying to help them understand what their rights were, because they had a right to not be paid $1 a day or whatever. I mean, it's horrible, the forced labor market in this country. So what do you guys have on tap with respect to battling that?
So forced labor, I'm glad you brought that up. So forced labor, there's a difference between forced labor and somebody being underpaid. And so unfortunately, the folks that are here in the United States illegally get taken advantage of, because, if you're in a particular job and that job pays $10 an hour, if an employer can hire somebody illegal and pay them $5 an hour, that's not necessarily forced labor. It can be, but it's not necessarily forced labor. Forced labor typically goes towards somebody, the typical situation we see is individuals that are coming from countries. It happens a lot in domestic workers, happens in agriculture, the hotel industry, anywhere where there's a lot of that. People coming thinking that they're going to work as a nanny or as a waiter in a restaurant. They typically go to a foreign country, and that employer takes their immigration documents and says, okay, now you have to owe this debt. You owe me $7,000 for me bringing you here. And then I'm going to take a portion of your wages for your room and board, and they never get out from under the debt. Saw that a lot. I did a lot of training over in the Middle East through the American Bar Association. They have a lot of forced labor issues, especially in some of the wealthier Middle Eastern countries. You have people that bring in folks from Pakistan or Afghanistan or Central and North Africa to work. But these agencies are not, on the up and up. And so they'll say, hey, to the potential or the future victim, you can make, $500 a week or whatever the equivalent is. And in reality, they'll never make $500 a week because they owe for their smuggling fee, they owe for their room and board, they owe for this. And they are in a vulnerable position because they're in a foreign country. Perhaps they don't speak the language. They don't know, how everything works. Perhaps there's threats to their family in their home country. So there's all sorts of, there's a huge dynamic when it comes to forced labor. As far as what OUR is doing, we're able to help repatriate and provide resources to victims that are identified and get them back to their home country. So if you have, people that were brought from South America to, say, Turkey, we can pay for those plane tickets. We can pay for, resources and psychological counseling to get those folks back on their feet.
Wow, that's incredible. And so you guys are worldwide. How many people do you have working worldwide?
We have 100 employees and several dozens of contractors in various countries. I think, I guess I should know this, and my boss is probably going to kill me for not knowing this.
No, it's just
like 35 countries. It's quite a few.
I was just curious though, because it really does seem like you guys are real life superheroes. So I'm like, how many superheroes does it take to save all these children and women and forced laborers and the child sacrifice? I mean, it's heart wrenching, but I mean, it sounds like there's just a few of you and you guys are doing, the work of thousands.
Well, there's a few of us, but it's really our donors that are the heroes, because they give the money and they give the time and the resources and their volunteers to allow us to do this type of work, right? So it's not just, the 100 and so employees with OUR and the dozens of contractors around the world. It's really the donors. But we work in partnership with governments. Like, we can't do this ourselves. Government can't do this themselves. I mean, one of the things that I realized, and maybe I'm going off on a tangent and I'm sorry, when I worked in Washington as a senior policy counsel, is that the US government can't prosecute themselves out of this problem. You just can't. Just like the war on drugs, like that's been going on since before I was born, and I'm no spring chicken, right? So we need to partner with NGOs like OUR, other community organizations, faith-based groups, community groups, to really, number one, make the problem aware, make people aware of it, and to address it. And so we come in is that we have basically bureaucracy-free money to spend. We have experts that can do training to help folks in their foreign countries help themselves and train others. So that's what we provide.
Do you think, I have a kind of a personal question, and I know you've got some of your coworkers and Ross on the Zoom. So it seems like, obviously when you worked in DOJ, that's a pretty male dominated industry. And now I'm imagining that you're still working in a male dominated profession where you are now. How do you deal with do you face like special challenges because you have to work overseas probably with so many men that don't respect women or that are not used to working with women? So how do you deal with all that?
Well, I can tell you my fellow employees with OUR are fantastic. I feel there's no issues working with the folks there. But yes, it is a male dominated field. This prosecution was 100%, especially with violent crime. When I did a lot of cases with gangs and violent criminals, and it would be me and all of my male detectives, going out. And it's, I guess I grew up with a single mom. I mean, she was no wallflower. She didn't raise a wallflower. I mean, I am who I am. My sister's a retired lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. She must have done something right. We somehow can hold our own with that. But again, working in the Middle East where I was there, and I have to wear something over my hair, and you have to be very careful with your language. And it's like, how do you talk about sex trafficking without saying the word vagina?
Right.
Right. I mean, and I remember telling them up front, like, hey, I'm going to be using some language that may be offensive. So either plug your ears or let's go. I mean, this is the crime. This is it. So I personally haven't had to face any issues. And I Carrie, you know me, I bring the noise. Like, let's go.
I know. I'm just sitting here. I'm still in awe of you. I'm like, wow, you're like killing it over in the Middle East. You take New Jersey to the Middle East and you're like, y'all haven't met a girl from Jersey yet. Okay. I'm going to say what I want and you're going to have to deal with it.
I've had several family members say, everyone's like, oh, be careful if you go over there. And my sister will say, I pity the person who tries to know you, Allie. I do too. I love They're gonna let you go and go get rid of her, please.
Hey, speaking of it, tell us about some of the really good busts that you had when you were working for DOJ, because I know you had some big ones.
So in the child exploitation field, it's interesting. You think that it's this creepy person who wears glasses living in their mom's basement. It's not always that. The DOJ did a tremendous job. I mean, we arrested a former assistant secretary of the Navy, teachers, politicians, very wealthy people. Those are the very wealthy people, the ones that can afford to hire like outside counsel, special counsel. They thought they were above the law. I mean, look at somebody like Jeffrey Epstein.
Exactly.
That's what I was just thinking about.
Right?
Yeah, me too.
Like,
yeah.
look at him. Like, he didn't think that what he was doing was wrong. And if it was wrong, somebody else was going to, deal with it. It wasn't his fault. So other big cases I had were large gangs in San Diego. Criminally forfeited a hotel. It was one of the first times that we were able to show that the owners of the hotel were involved and knew about the sex trafficking of minors. So we took the hotel.
Wow.
Criminally forfeited the hotel. So one of the things that is a passion of mine, and I'm probably hijacking this conversation, so I'm sorry, is restitution.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that if two favorite things of being a DOJ prosecutor was putting people in jail and taking their shit.
Yeah.
I love it.
Love taking the trafficker stuff, because then we would take that and convert it into restitution to the victims. And so one of the things that I hope to do in my new role is help other governments draft their laws or their policies that they do the same. So if you do have a cartel owner that owns this big swanky house in whatever country, guess what? That country's going to take that and now provide resources for however many trafficking victims. Because it's not enough just to stop the trafficker. We can't let them benefit, them or their families or whatever, benefit from their illicit proceeds.
God, that's awesome. That is awesome, Allie. I didn't realize that they didn't have restitution abroad in some of these countries. I mean, that's amazing that you're bringing it to them. That's cool.
A lot of these countries don't have updated trafficking laws. I mean, and again, that's one thing that we, OUR, can bring to the table and help their governments, their legislative branches draft those laws so they can help themselves, and then hopefully train the people, the boots on the ground, how to go pull these kids out of harm's way, train the prosecutors, give due process to the traffickers, and then take their shit.
You should have an OUR shirt. We take their shit, baby.
Yes.
Hashtag restitution.
All right, so let's go with some more kind of questions from our panelists. Rose, do you want to go?
Yeah, I was thinking about what you just said about the laws. Do you get any pushback from any groups about that? Because I know in Florida, it's been a big thing about the hospitality industry doesn't want to take on, any of the liability or any of the issues with, when people are being trafficked through their hotels. I know, like last year, I think some legislation was put in that mandated training for hotel employees in Florida to look for trafficking. But other than that, there's like not any teeth to it, I don't think.
So I'm a big proponent of getting all hands on deck. And I'm going to mess up this quote, but I think it was Nelson Mandela said, there can be no keener interest in how a society treats their population if looking at their children. It's some words to that effect. I know I'm butchering Mr. Mandela's quote, but the point is, I think, well taken. We need to get community, industry, government, society involved in this. This is a human problem. And so for the big tech, for example, right, they have a responsibility. The transportation industry has a responsibility to at least report it. And I think, again, that's one thing that OUR does. We do a lot of training for industry on detecting it and identifying potential victims so they can adequately report it and give it to the experts, our law enforcement partners to address it. And if they choose not to, then perhaps you build a criminal case like I did against the Oceanside Travel Lodge, where we took it.
Take it.
I love it. I think the hotels in Florida, I think their lobbyist industry was scared of liability, like Rose said, where, oh, we'll look out for it, but what kind of liability are we going to have if we don't see it? And are the plaintiff's lawyers going to come after us and make us pay for it? And the answer should be yes. I mean, they're willing to take money for people to stay in the hotels, but they're not willing to look out to see if you have a trash can full of like 50 condoms. You know what I mean? Or if you have women coming in and out, I mean, it's not that hard to see that you've got a different woman coming in and out or a different man coming in and out of the room every hour.
Sure. So, I mean, I think it's fair if you have an industry, at least number one, give them at least some training on things. And your point's well taken, Carrie. I mean, the hotel staff, the maintenance staff, I mean, they're in the rooms where this is happening. And you're right. If you see 50 condoms, perhaps you should say something to somebody. And if they're doing their best, because no one's expecting the hospitality industry, the transportation industry, or the beauty industry, nail salons, hair salons, to be cops, but they can certainly report it. And then it's on the government, right? Then it's on law enforcement to do their job.
Where do they report it to?
They can report it to the local FBI office, the local police department, the human trafficking hotline, that Polaris project, which is a big NGO. Tell somebody, say something. One of the campaigns, I think it's Homeland Security's blue campaign, see something, say something. We need to train. I mean, how many stories have you seen about airline flight attendants thinking there's something up, and they report it? Or I just went to maybe this is TMI, I just went to the, lady doctor. I went into the bathroom to do your thing, and there was a thing that said, if you're being trafficked, use the red pen to write your name. If you're not, you can use the black pen.
It's at my
That's interesting.
Right? Like that's in a,
Yeah.
I've seen that online. That's cool.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, I see it on the back of the bathroom doors in the airports too.
Exactly. I mean, it's just public awareness, right? It's public awareness that this is a problem, and it's a problem that's happening everywhere. Again, being a child of the 80s, those of you who are over the age of 40, how many of you remember Just Say No to Drugs?
Oh yeah, that was Nancy Reagan's thing, wasn't it?
Yep, Nancy Reagan, and then you had the egg and the frying pan and the
this is your brain on drugs.
Right, we all remember that's public awareness. That's how prolific this should be on human trafficking. If I ruled the world, we would have I shouldn't say if, when I rule the world,
There you go.
I would have a teaching block in all schools on, we have drug education, we have sex ed education, we should have human trafficking education on some levels. So kids are aware of what it is.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I don't know why that's not happening. I mean, there's no harm in it, and it doesn't take very long to explain what it is.
Right. And to be aware.
Yeah. Kia, were you going to say something?
I was, but I think Betsy was itching. She had a question. I'm sorry.
All right.
Yeah. So, and I think a lot of us do. Are there any popular destinations where Americans go that have a particular problem with this, that we should be on higher alert if we go to those popular destinations?
Are you talking in the US or overseas or both?
I mean, it could be the Caribbean, could be overseas, could be anywhere Americans like to go, that maybe one of us might end up there, and we should know that they've got a particular problem there with trafficking and be extra careful.
So again, trafficking looks different in different places. So one of the top destinations is Southeast Asia, right? Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, huge sex trafficking or sex tourism area, where you have these mostly men going overseas, and you can buy a 10-year-old boy or a 10-year-old girl, and for any given amount of time and spend time with them. Yeah, no, we have that. Same thing in the Middle East, and we're also seeing it a lot more in Africa. I mean, as Africa becomes more of a tourist destination, you're going to see that. In the US, San Diego ranks in the top 10 cities every year for child sex trafficking. Atlanta, Miami, New York, Oakland, California. I mean, they're different cities. Every city's got it. It's just a gradation, or it's all relative to how bad the trafficking occurs. So I hate to say this, but it's everywhere. It's happening everywhere. It just looks different. In the Virgin Islands, where I lived, you didn't see streetwalkers. right? Because first of all, there's no sidewalks anywhere in St. Thomas. There's no sidewalks whatsoever. It's just the road. So there's no street walking, but it was certain hotels or certain clubs that everybody knew, or if you were into that you knew where to go. If you can go buy a drink at this particular location, and you could also go buy a girl. And in St. Thomas, we saw a lot of women from South America, Venezuela, Central America being trafficked that way. Here in San Diego, you can go down to El Cajon Boulevard, which is our big track or a big area where prostitution occurs, and you can see mostly women walking up and down the street. What you don't see a lot of is young men. That is more hidden. That is a harder crime on the trafficking side to find, because that's usually more word of mouth versus, I mean, you see it on the internet, don't get me wrong, but usually the male victims are harder to detect.
Do you think legalization of prostitution is gonna change that and maybe make that better, or do you think it'll make it worse?
Make what worse? Trafficking?
Trafficking, right?
Well, there was a study. I hate to not answer your question, but I'm just going to throw this out there. I mean, I have my own personal views. The state of Rhode Island had decriminalized prostitution for about 17 years in the late 90s and early 2000s. And what they found was that legalization of prostitution increased other crimes, drug usage, theft, drunk and disorderly. Because with that type of conduct, because it was legal, you didn't have police presence. So you could have, for example, people robbing the women working as prostitutes because they knew they had money on them. The police weren't there to bust the women working as prostitutes because it was legal. So now they were more susceptible to other types of crime. I don't know the answer to that. I know that when I was in DC, the District of Columbia had a big initiative to try to decriminalize prostitution. I don't think that's going to solve the problem, because at the end of the day, somebody is always going to be making money. I'm here in California. I was just having lunch with a friend of mine who still works at the U.S. Attorney's Office. In California, marijuana is legal. Smoking, possessing, using marijuana is legal. But guess what? There are a lot of illegal marijuana dispensaries, because it is cheaper for the illegal marijuana dispensaries to operate because of all the taxes that the legal dispensaries pay. So it's better to use a pop-up and pay the fine than be a registered dispensary. So is legalizing marijuana better than making it illegal, where you have, if someone's robbing that particular dispensary? So my personal opinion is no, it is not going to help the problem. It's not.
It's an interesting issue, though. Very interesting. Kia, I think I stepped on your time. I'm sorry.
No, you didn't. She kind of went into one of the questions that I was going to refer to. But one of the things I was going to ask as well, what is and maybe this isn't one that you can fully answer, but what are some of the biggest industries that you're seeing trafficking happen? And when I say that, I'm more so talking about the people that want these kids, or these humans, or what have you. Where is it coming from? Like, what industries?
Are you talking about for sex or for labor, or
for sex and for the labor?
Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Industries who want child sex trafficking?
Correct. So what I'm saying is almost like, and this is probably a bad example, a Walmart. If a Walmart wanted humans for trafficking. So what industries are you actually seeing that are pulling in or want to have people to come in to do this labor? And not just, immigration or what have you. What's underneath the radar that we need to pay more attention to that we don't know about?
So the top industries for forced labor are the hospitality industry, construction, agriculture, domestic work. So that's either, domestics helping to care for babies or elderly parents, those sorts of things, domestic help, folks who clean your house. Those are and the fishing industry. I didn't realize the fishing industry is a huge problem with labor trafficking, especially in Southeast Asia. because they can't get people to stay on these boats long enough to go far enough out. I learned all about that when I was in Washington. So those are the main industries that have a lot of forced labor. But again, that's like in traditional industries. I mean, you have forced labor with child soldiers, right? If you've got these little groups in say Central Africa that want to take over a country, they'll start recruiting the young men, at age 8, teaching them how to fire a gun, and that's a form of trafficking. I hope that answers your question. As far as the okay, good.
Especially the fishing industry. I never would have thought of that. Never.
Mm-mm.
Either did I until I went to DC. I'm like, what? Fishing? Huge problem in Southeast Asia.
Right.
Fishing. Yeah.
Kimmy, do you have any last thoughts or last questions?
I don't. Thank you so much for being here, Allie. It's been really interesting and educational, and I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
Been extremely enlightening, extremely, very educational.
It's kind of like, I used to tell juries this all the time when they sit on my jury. I'm like, ladies and gentlemen, you've all seen the movie The Matrix, where you have the blue pill and the red pill, where you're all going to be swallowing the red pill because you're going to learn about something that this is not something that you talk about every day.
Ooh. But I love the idea of like talking about it in schools and educating children from a young age. I think that's brilliant. It needs to be done like immediately.
We used to have a superintendent here in San Diego. She happened to be married to a sergeant with the vice department at San Diego PD. And she developed a curriculum to do that in all of the schools in her school district. And I thought that was brilliant. Yeah. Just teaching them about what it is and what it isn't. It's brilliant.
Well, thank you so much. Does anybody have, Kia, I did it again. Sorry. Go, Kia, your turn.
Okay, I was just gonna say, education is definitely great for the community, because without that, we'll never know. I think one of the biggest things, just to end on, is that I believe that all employers need to get educated on how to actually identify, human trafficking. And one of the biggest things that we have here in Tallahassee is STAC, Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. And they just recently developed a resource for employers to go and get trained. So just to throw that out there, it's available in our community, and we definitely need to become educated. I think that's something just like, when you're educating about workers' compensation, that's something that employers need to have for all of their employees to get educated on as well. So just wanted to throw that out there from a state level, local level, and a federal level. We now have you as a resource, and I just want to thank you so much for coming on. Carrie always surrounds herself with, I don't want to curse because my mom and dad are watching right now, but ASSs. So we knew it was going to be something good. You were going to be a bad.
Oh, she's the baddest of them all. She is the baddest.
So thank you so much for this. And, we're so afraid to always talk about taboo things. But this is necessary because unfortunately this heinous crime is here. So we have to, and until it's gone, we have to keep educating ourselves on it. So I thank you for all your efforts and everything that you're doing. Continue to be a superpower, empowered woman, mom, wife, all of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well said, Kia. Thanks, Allie.
Wait,
bye.
I'm just
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.